Very few actors in Hollywood who can sit down, watch themselves from 30 years ago, and laugh genuinely, helplessly, from the gut at who they used to be. Fewer still can do it on camera for millions of people to witness without a single trace of embarrassment hiding behind the humor. Matthew Lillard is one of those rare people. What you're about to experience isn't just a highlight reel. It isn't a polished career retrospective engineered by a publicist to remind you that someone is still relevant. What this truly is something far more human, far more honest, and far more entertaining than that. This is a man in his mid-50s sitting across from Entertainment Tonight, watching clips of himself from the age of 20-something and reacting in real time with the same unfiltered energy that made the world fall in love with him in the first place. His name is Matthew Lillard, and if you don't already know who he is, you are about to find out exactly why so many people have his face tattooed on their bodies. Yes, you read that right, tattooed on their bodies. But we'll get there. Let's start at the beginning. The year is 1995. Grunge is fading, the internet is still a mystery to most of America, and a young, wiry, impossibly energetic actor named Matthew Lillard steps onto the set of a film called Hackers, a movie that, for better or worse, would define a generation's idea of what cyber cool looked like. The hair. Let's talk about the hair. When ET rolls the clip and Matthew sees himself, young, earnest, working every single line like his life depends on it, the first thing he clocks is that hair. And there's a beat. One of those glorious, painful beats where you can see a person processing the full weight of the choices their younger self made. He doesn't run from it, he leans in, he owns it, because that's who Matthew Lillard is. What he says about that version of himself is quietly devastating and deeply relatable all at once. He calls himself a kid trying really hard on every line to be exceptional. Not talented, not gifted, not already arrived, trying hard to be exceptional. There's something almost unbearably honest about that. Because when you watch that footage, when you see the young Matthew Lillard vibrating with ambition, throwing himself into every moment, you understand that what you're watching isn't confidence, it's hunger. It's a kid who hasn't made it yet and knows it and is channeling every ounce of that anxiety into performance. He worked alongside Angelina Jolie on that film. Angelina Jolie, who was already, even then, someone who seemed to exist on a different plane of existence than ordinary mortals. And Matthew Lillard was right there beside her, doing the work, committing to the bit, making something out of nothing. Hackers wasn't a massive hit. It wasn't the film that changed everything, but it was the audition, the warm-up, the proof that this kid had something raw and real and genuinely weird that the camera couldn't look away from. And Hollywood was about to find out just how weird that something could get. Now we get to the one. If Matthew Lillard has a Mount Rushmore moment in his career, it lives in 1996. It lives in a little horror movie called Scream, directed by the legendary Wes Craven, written by Kevin Williamson, and full to bursting with a cast of young actors who were all in their own ways trying to prove something. But nobody proved it quite like Matthew Lillard. Here's a detail about the casting of Scream that most people don't know, and that Matthew tells with obvious relish. He didn't originally audition for Stu Macher. He auditioned for Billy Loomis, the killer, the brooding, intense, darkly handsome killer, the role that went to Skeet Ulrich. The casting director, bless her, took one look at Matthew Lillard going full Matthew Lillard in that audition room and said, with the kind of gentle, pragmatic wisdom that only casting directors possess, something along the lines of, "You're not making out with Neve Campbell anytime soon, but there's a crazy best friend, that might be the way to go." And so, 3 hours later, Matthew Lillard was in the same office auditioning for Wes Craven himself. And Wes Craven, master of horror, creator of Freddy Krueger, a man who had spent decades studying the mechanics of fear and tension and human reaction, gave him the part in the room. In the room. That doesn't happen. That almost never happens in Hollywood. You go home, you wait, you check your phone 14 times, you don't find out right there sitting in front of the director that you got the job. but he did. And then comes the clip. The glorious, cringeworthy, magnificent clip of young Matthew Lillard doing the thing with his tongue. He watches it and he absolutely loses it. "What am I doing with my tongue?" he demands to no one in particular. "What is that? What is that?" What it is, Matthew, is pure instinct, pure chaos energy, pure Stu Macher. Because Stu Macher is not a character that was ever going to be played by someone controlled and measured and careful. Stu Macher needed to be played by someone who would do something with his tongue on camera and not even realize he was doing it until watching it back 28 years later. His first manager apparently noticed it immediately, looked at him and said, "You have to stop doing that." He did not entirely stop doing that, and the world is better for it. Scream came out and, in Matthew Lillard's own words, changed everything. The movie became a phenomenon. It reinvented the slasher genre. It made self-aware horror a mainstream conversation. It launched careers. And here is where the story gets interesting. Here is where it gets real. Matthew Lillard says something in this retrospective that is so blunt, so unvarnished, so at odds with the mythology of Hollywood overnight success stories that it deserves to be heard slowly and clearly. He says, "The funny thing is, he didn't work a lot after Scream. Because of Scream." Let that sit for a second. One of the most memorable performances in one of the most beloved horror films of the 1990s, a character who would become iconic, a scene that people would still be quoting and reenacting decades later. Conventions, tattoos, fan devotion of a kind that most actors never experience. And Matthew Lillard still struggled to find parts, still struggled to get jobs, didn't make a lot of money on the movie, worked 4 weeks on the film, and then waited in the lull for things to pick up. It's a reminder, a sharp, necessary reminder, that Hollywood is not a meritocracy, that talent is not a guarantee, that even the moments that look from the outside like they should have launched everything, sometimes just don't. Not right away. But here's what the lull didn't take from him: the work itself, Stu Macher, the performance, the art. That remained, and slowly, incrementally, the world caught up to it. Because now in 2024, 2025, as this retrospective happens, the fascination around Scream is, in Matthew Lillard's words, more relevant than it ever has been. The fans have grown up. They've become parents who introduce their kids to Ghostface. They've become artists who tattoo the film on their skin as an act of devotion. They've become a community, and Matthew Lillard is at the center of that community, whether he planned it that way or not. Speaking of community, let's pause here and appreciate something that doesn't always get enough attention in these kinds of retrospectives. The horror fan community is one of the most passionate, most dedicated, most genuinely loving communities in all of entertainment fandom. And within that community, Scream occupies a very particular place. It was smart when horror wasn't supposed to be smart. It was funny when horror wasn't supposed to be funny. It was self-aware when self-awareness was considered a liability rather than an asset. And Stu Macher, Matthew Lillard's Stu Macher, became the character that the fan base held onto with a ferocity that borders on the religious. Matthew talks about doing conventions all the time, about seeing kids, grown adults who were children when the film came out, or younger people who discovered it through their parents or through streaming, with his face tattooed on their bodies. He says this not with the detached bemusement of a celebrity who finds their fans amusing but slightly incomprehensible. He says it with genuine wonder, with the voice of a man who still, after all these years, can't quite believe that his work has meant that much to people. And alongside all of this, there's Ghostface vodka. Because if you're Matthew Lillard, if you are the original Ghostface, if you have watched this franchise grow into a cultural institution over 3 decades, you don't just participate in the legacy, you manifest it into physical form and put it on a shelf. Ghostface vodka is exactly what it sounds like, and exactly as brilliant as it sounds. Because why not? Why should the legacy of Ghostface live only in film and convention appearances and tattoos? Why can't it pour into a glass at a Halloween party, at a horror movie marathon, at a gathering of friends who grew up with Scream and want to raise something in its honor. Only Matthew Lillard. After Scream, the lull. But in that lull, there was still work. There was Senseless, there was She's All That, there was a running creative partnership with Freddie Prinze Jr. that would define a whole era of late 90s, early 2000s cinema. The Senseless clip is a particular treat. He watches himself, pierced, young, doing an interview in shorts. Like, who is this monster, he asks, absolutely appalled by his own choices, and cracks up at the voice.
For full video, click related link below or like and subscribe this channel.